It was a regular Tuesday afternoon at the Grand Metropolitan Hotel when everything changed for 12-year-old David Thompson. The marble floors gleamed under the crystal chandeliers, and the soft jazz music played in the background as business people walked through the elegant lobby. David sat quietly in one of the plush leather chairs near the window, his school backpack beside him and a book open in his lap. He had been waiting for about 20 minutes now. His mom was upstairs in some important meeting on the top floor, and she had told him to wait in the lobby until she was done. This wasn't unusual for David. His mom traveled a lot for work, and sometimes he would come with her during school breaks or after classes. Hotels were like second homes to him by now. David turned another page of his adventure book, completely absorbed in the story about pirates and treasure islands. He was a good kid who never caused trouble. His school uniform was neat and clean. His shoes were polished, and he sat with perfect posture just like his mom had taught him. But as he read, he didn't notice the woman behind the reception desk watching him with growing concern. Rebecca Walsh had been working as the hotel manager for 3 years. She was in her early 40s, always dressed professionally, and took pride in running what she believed was one of the finest hotels in the city. She noticed everything that happened in her lobby, and right now, something didn't feel right to her. A young boy, sitting alone, with no adults around. Rebecca watched as business people came and went, as hotel guests checked in and out, but this child just sat there. She frowned and checked her watch. How long had he been there? She couldn't remember seeing him come in with anyone. After another 10 minutes passed, Rebecca couldn't ignore it anymore. She walked over to David, her heels clicking on the marble floor. David looked up from his book with a polite smile. "Excuse me, young man," Rebecca said, her voice stern but trying to sound concerned. "Are you supposed to be here?" David blinked, a little confused by the question. "Yes, ma'am. I'm waiting for my mom." "Your mom?" Rebecca looked around the lobby. "Where is she?" "She's in a meeting upstairs," David replied, closing his book but keeping his finger on the page to mark his spot. "She told me to wait here until she's done." Rebecca's frown deepened. "A meeting? What kind of meeting?" "A business meeting, I think. She has those a lot." David's voice was still polite, but he was starting to feel a little uncomfortable. Why was this woman asking him so many questions? "And she just left you down here alone?" Rebecca's tone suggested she didn't believe him. "Yes, ma'am, she does that sometimes when her meetings are boring. I like reading here anyway, it's quiet." Rebecca looked at David's clothes, taking in his school uniform and neat appearance, but something still bothered her. She had never seen this child before, and she knew most of the regular guests. Important business meetings happened in the hotel all the time, but parents didn't usually just leave their children unattended in the lobby. "What's your mother's name?" Rebecca asked. "Dr. Angela Thompson," David answered without hesitation. Rebecca raised an eyebrow. "Dr. Thompson? I don't recall any Dr. Thompson having meetings scheduled today." "Maybe you just don't know about all the meetings," David suggested innocently. "Mom says some of her meetings are really important and private." This answer only made Rebecca more suspicious. She was the hotel manager. She knew about all the important meetings that happened in her hotel. No one had mentioned anything about a Dr. Thompson to her. "Well, I'm going to need to verify this," Rebecca said. "You can't just sit here without proper supervision." David's stomach started to feel funny. "But my mom said I could wait here. She'll be down soon." "That's what you say," Rebecca replied. "But I need to make sure you're telling the truth." As Rebecca walked back to the front desk, David watched her with growing worry. He had never been questioned like this before. In all the other hotels he had visited with his mom, the staff had always been nice to him. Some even knew him by name because they traveled to the same places so often. Rebecca called over her assistant manager, a young man named Kevin who had only been working there for 6 months. "Kevin, do you see that boy over there?" she whispered, nodding toward David. Kevin looked over and saw David, who had gone back to reading his book but kept glancing nervously at the front desk. "Yeah, what about him?" "He's been sitting there for almost an hour now. Claims his mother is in some meeting upstairs, but I don't know anything about it." Says her name is Dr. Thompson. Kevin shrugged. Maybe it's a private meeting? Sometimes. The big shots book the conference rooms directly through corporate. Rebecca shook her head. I would still know about it. Something doesn't add up. I think he might be lying. He looks harmless enough, Kevin said. Just a kid reading a book. That's exactly what's suspicious, Rebecca insisted. What 12-year-old just sits quietly reading for an hour? Most kids would be running around making noise, bothering other guests. Kevin had to admit that was unusual, but he wasn't sure it was suspicious. Maybe he's just a well-behaved kid. Or maybe he's been told to sit there and case the place, Rebecca said, her imagination running wild. You hear about these things. Kids being used to distract people while someone else steals from rooms or purses. Kevin looked at her skeptically. Rebecca, he's reading a book about pirates. I don't think he's planning a heist. But Rebecca had made up her mind. She walked back over to David, this time with Kevin following behind her. Young man, I'm going to need you to come with me to the front desk so we can call your mother. David looked up, his eyes wide with confusion and growing fear. But she said not to interrupt her meeting unless it was an emergency. Well, this might be becoming an emergency, Rebecca said firmly. You can't just sit here without proper authorization. But I'm not doing anything wrong, David protested, his voice getting smaller. I'm just reading. Other guests in the lobby started to notice the commotion. A businessman looked up from his laptop and an elderly couple paused their conversation to watch what was happening. That's not the point, Rebecca continued. Hotel policy states that unaccompanied minors need to be supervised. David's heart started beating faster. He had never heard of such a policy before, and he had spent time in hotel lobbies many times. But this woman seemed very serious, and he didn't want to get in trouble. Can you please just wait until my mom comes down? David asked, his voice barely above a whisper. No, I cannot wait, Rebecca said, her patience running thin. I need to verify your story right now. As more people started to stare, David felt his cheeks getting hot with embarrassment. He had never been in trouble before, and he didn't understand why this was happening. All he wanted was to finish his chapter and wait for his mom like she had asked him to do. Rebecca looked around at the other guests watching the scene, and she felt even more convinced that she was doing the right thing. She couldn't have random children disrupting the peaceful atmosphere of her hotel. What would people think about the security and management of the Grand Metropolitan if just anyone could walk in and sit around? Little did she know that her next decision would change everything, not just for David and his mother, but for her own future as well. The tension in the lobby continued to build as Rebecca made up her mind about what to do next. Rebecca walked back to the front desk with determination in her steps. She had made up her mind. This situation had gone on long enough, and she wasn't going to let some kid sit in her lobby without proper supervision any longer. Kevin followed behind her, still looking uncertain about the whole thing. I'm calling security, Rebecca announced as she reached for the phone. Wait, maybe we should try calling the conference rooms first, Kevin suggested. If his mom really is in a meeting upstairs, we could just verify it that way. Rebecca paused for a moment, then shook her head. I already told you. I don't know about any Dr. Thompson having meetings today. Besides, if she was really here for legitimate business, she would have registered her son at the front desk. That's standard procedure for families staying in our hotel. But he's not staying here, Kevin pointed out. He's just waiting. Exactly my point, Rebecca said, picking up the phone. Unaccompanied minors waiting in hotel lobbies without proper authorization is a security concern. What if something happens to him? What if he gets hurt? The hotel would be liable. David watched nervously from his chair as the two adults talked at the front desk. He couldn't hear exactly what they were saying, but he could tell they were talking about him. Other people in the lobby were starting to stare more openly now, and David felt his face getting hot with embarrassment. An older woman sitting nearby leaned over to her husband. Poor child, she whispered. I wonder what's wrong. Probably just a misunderstanding, her husband replied, but he looked concerned too. David tried to focus on his book again, but the words seemed to blur together on the page. His stomach felt funny, and he kept glancing at the elevators, hoping his mom would appear any minute to clear up this confusion. Rebecca dialed the hotel's security office. "Hello, this is Rebecca Walsh, the lobby manager. I need someone down here right away. We have a situation with an unaccompanied minor." Within 5 minutes, a security guard named Officer Martinez arrived in the lobby. He was a tall, serious-looking man in his 50s who had worked hotel security for over 20 years. He approached the front desk where Rebecca was waiting for him. "What seems to be the problem, Ms. Walsh?" he asked in a professional tone. Rebecca pointed toward David. "That boy has been sitting there for over an hour claiming he's waiting for his mother. But I have no record of any meetings involving anyone named Dr. Thompson today. I think he might be lying about why he's here." Officer Martinez looked over at David, who was clearly trying to make himself invisible in the large leather chair. "Has he caused any disturbance? Any problems with other guests?" "Well, no," Rebecca admitted. "But that's not the point. Hotel policy clearly states that unaccompanied minors need to be properly registered and supervised. For all we know, he could be a runaway, or worse." Officer Martinez had dealt with many situations over the years, and something about this didn't feel right to him. The boy looked well-dressed, well-behaved, and genuinely scared rather than deceptive. But Rebecca was his supervisor, and she seemed very concerned about the situation. "Have you tried calling any of the conference rooms to verify his story?" Officer Martinez asked. "I don't need to call anywhere," Rebecca said firmly. "I know what meetings are scheduled in this hotel, and there's no Dr. Thompson on the list." Officer Martinez nodded slowly. "All right, I'll go talk to him and see what he has to say." As the security guard walked toward him, David's heart started pounding even faster. He had never been in trouble with security before, and he didn't understand why reading a book in a hotel lobby was causing such a big problem. "Hello there, son," Officer Martinez said in a gentle but firm voice as he approached David's chair. "I'm Officer Martinez, head of security here at the hotel. I understand you're waiting for your mother?" David looked up with wide, nervous eyes. "Yes, sir. She's in a meeting upstairs. She told me to wait here until she was done." "What's your mother's name?" "Dr. Angela Thompson," David answered, his voice slightly shaking now. "And do you know what room or floor this meeting is taking?" "Place on?" David thought for a moment. "She said something about the penthouse level, the really high floor with the big conference room." Officer Martinez made a note of this information. The penthouse conference suite was indeed used for high-level business meetings, often by corporate executives and important clients. But those meetings were usually arranged through the hotel's corporate office, not the local management. "How did you get here today, David?" Officer Martinez asked. "My mom drove us here from school. She picked me up early because she had to come to this meeting, and she didn't want to leave me home alone." "And what school do you go to?" David named his private school, which Officer Martinez recognized as one of the more expensive schools in the area. The boy's story seemed consistent, and his uniform matched the school he had mentioned. "David, I need to ask you something important," Officer Martinez said, sitting down in the chair next to him. "Do you have any way to contact your mother? A phone number or anything like that?" David nodded and reached into his backpack, pulling out a small cell phone. "She gave me this for emergencies, but she said not to call during her meetings unless something really bad happened." "Well, I think this might qualify as something that needs her attention," Officer Martinez said gently. "Would it be okay if we called her?" David hesitated. His mom had been very clear about not interrupting her meetings. She had important business to take care of, and she had trusted him to wait quietly without causing any problems. But now there were all these adults asking him questions, and he was starting to feel really scared. "I guess so," David said quietly, "but she might be upset that I bothered her." Officer Martinez took the phone and looked at the contact list. Sure enough, there was a contact labeled Mom with a phone number. He also noticed contacts for Dad, Grandma, and school office, which seemed like normal contacts for a 12-year-old to have. Back at the front desk, Rebecca was watching the interaction with growing impatience. She had other duties to attend to, and this situation was taking far too long to resolve in her opinion. "Well?" She called over to Officer Martinez. "Are you going to call or not?" Several other guests had stopped what they were doing to watch the scene unfold. A businessman at a nearby table lowered his newspaper to get a better look. Two women who had been having coffee started whispering to each other about what might be happening. David noticed all the attention and felt his cheeks burning with embarrassment. He had never been the center of this kind of attention before, and he didn't like it at all. All he wanted was for his mom to finish her meeting so they could go home. "I think we should call," Officer Martinez decided. "If your mother is really here for a meeting, then we can clear this up quickly and everyone can go back to their day." David nodded reluctantly and watched as Officer Martinez dialed his mother's number. The phone rang once, twice, 3 times. David held his breath, hoping his mom wouldn't be too angry about the interruption. On the 4th ring, a professional voice answered the phone. "Angela Thompson speaking." Officer Martinez cleared his throat. "Dr. Thompson, this is Officer Martinez from the security department at the Grand Metropolitan Hotel. I'm calling because we have your son David here in the lobby, and there seems to be some concern about his presence here." There was a pause on the other end of the line that seemed to last forever. When Dr. Thompson spoke again, her voice had changed completely. It was still professional, but there was something cold and steel-like about it now. "I'm sorry. Could you repeat that? There's concern about my son's presence in the hotel?" The tone of her voice made Officer Martinez realize that this conversation was about to become much more serious than he had anticipated. Officer Martinez suddenly felt very uncomfortable holding the phone. The way Dr. Thompson's voice had changed, from friendly and professional to cold and controlled, made him realize that something big was about to happen. He had been doing security work for over 20 years, and he had learned to recognize when a situation was about to go from bad to worse. "Yes, ma'am," he said carefully. "Your son David has been waiting in our lobby for about an hour and a half now." Our manager, Ms. Walsh, was concerned because she wasn't aware of any scheduled meetings today involving a Dr. Thompson. The silence on the other end of the phone stretched so long that Officer Martinez wondered if the call had been dropped. When Dr. Thompson finally spoke again, each word was measured and precise. "Let me make sure I understand this correctly, Officer Martinez. My 12-year-old son is sitting quietly in your lobby, reading a book and bothering no one, and your staff has decided this is a problem that requires security intervention?" Officer Martinez glanced over at David, who was watching him anxiously from his chair. The boy looked exactly as his mother had described: quiet, well-behaved, and not bothering anyone. "Well, ma'am, it's hotel policy that unaccompanied minors need to be properly supervised and registered." "I see," Dr. Thompson said. And somehow those 2 simple words carried more weight than a long, angry speech. "And did anyone think to simply ask David for my contact information before involving security?" Officer Martinez looked back toward the front desk where Rebecca was waiting impatiently, tapping her fingers on the marble counter. Kevin stood beside her, looking more and more uncomfortable as the situation continued. The manager felt it was necessary to verify the situation through proper channels, Officer Martinez explained, though even as he said it, he realized how weak it sounded. "Proper channels," Dr. Thompson repeated slowly. "And what exactly made my son's presence seem suspicious enough to warrant security intervention? Was he causing a disturbance, being disruptive, bothering other guests?" "No, ma'am. He was just sitting and reading." Another long pause. Just sitting and reading. Officer Martinez was starting to sweat despite the hotel's perfect air conditioning. He had dealt with angry parents before, but something about this conversation felt different. Dr. Thompson wasn't yelling or getting emotional. Her calm, controlled tone was somehow much more intimidating. "Officer Martinez, may I ask you a question?" "Of course, ma'am." "In your experience working hotel security, how often do you see children sitting quietly in lobbies while their parents attend business meetings?" Officer Martinez thought about it. "Actually, it happens fairly regularly, especially with business travelers who bring their families." "And how often does your staff call security on those children?" The question hung in the air like a challenge. Officer Martinez knew the answer, and he suspected Dr. Thompson knew it too. In all his years of security work, he had never been called to deal with a well-behaved child simply sitting in a lobby. Not often, he admitted quietly. Not often, Dr. Thompson repeated. In fact, I would guess never. Would I be correct in that assumption? Officer Martinez looked around the lobby. Near the window, an elderly man was reading a newspaper. At a table by the bar, a woman was working on her laptop while her young daughter colored in a coloring book. Nobody had called security on them. Yes, ma'am. You would be correct. Rebecca had been trying to listen to the conversation from the front desk, but she could only hear Officer Martinez's side of it. From his increasingly uncomfortable body language and the way his voice was getting quieter, she could tell that things weren't going the way she had expected. What's taking so long? Rebecca called over to him. Just tell her to come down and get her kid. Officer Martinez held up his hand to signal for her to wait, but Rebecca was running out of patience. She had other responsibilities to handle, and this situation was taking up too much of her time. Dr. Thompson's voice came through the phone again, and this time there was no mistaking the steel beneath the professional tone. Officer Martinez, I'm going to give you some information and I want you to write it down carefully. Yes, ma'am. I am Dr. Angela Thompson, CEO of Thompson Hospitality Group. Do you know what Thompson Hospitality Group is, Officer Martinez? Officer Martinez felt his stomach drop. Thompson Hospitality Group was one of the largest hotel chains in the country. If this woman was telling the truth, then she wasn't just some random business person having a meeting in the hotel. She was, potentially, someone very important in the hospitality industry. I'm familiar with the company, yes, ma'am. Good. Then you might be interested to know that Thompson Hospitality Group owns 58 hotels across the United States, including several luxury properties very much like the Grand Metropolitan. Officer Martinez's mouth went dry. He looked over at Rebecca, who was still standing at the front desk looking annoyed and impatient. She had no idea what she had just walked into. Now, Officer Martinez, I'm going to ask you another question, and I want you to think very carefully before you answer. When you look at my son David, what exactly do you see that makes him different from any other child who might be waiting in your lobby? The question hit Officer Martinez like a punch to the stomach. He looked at David again, really looked at him this time. The boy was well-dressed, polite, quiet, and clearly from a good family. His backpack was expensive, his school uniform was from one of the best private schools in the city, and he had been nothing but respectful to everyone who had approached him. But Officer Martinez also couldn't ignore the obvious answer to Dr. Thompson's question. David was a young black boy in a predominantly white upscale hotel, and Officer Martinez realized with growing horror that this was probably exactly what Dr. Thompson was getting at. Ma'am, he started, but found himself unable to finish the sentence. Take your time, Officer Martinez. It's an important question. Rebecca was getting more frustrated by the minute. She walked over to where Officer Martinez was standing with the phone. What is taking so long? She demanded. Just tell whoever that is to come get their kid right now, or we're going to have to call the real police. Officer Martinez looked at her with wide eyes and quickly covered the phone's mouthpiece. Rebecca, I think you need to know something important. What? She snapped. This woman says she's the CEO of Thompson Hospitality Group. Rebecca's annoyed expression didn't change. So what? I've never heard of it. Thompson Hospitality Group owns hotel chains, Officer Martinez said slowly. Big hotel chains. Rebecca shrugged. Well, that doesn't change anything. Her kid still can't just sit here without proper authorization. I don't care who she thinks she is. Officer Martinez stared at her in disbelief. Even if she didn't understand the full implications of what was happening, Rebecca's attitude seemed completely wrong for the situation. Dr. Thompson's voice came through the phone again. Officer Martinez, are you still there? Yes, ma'am. I heard voices. Was that Ms. Walsh you were speaking with? Yes, ma'am. I see. Well, Officer Martinez, I think it's time for me to come downstairs and handle this situation in person. But before I do, I want you to know that I will be bringing some colleagues with me. Colleagues, ma'am? Yes, I'm currently in a meeting with the regional directors for our East Coast operations, as well as our head of corporate compliance and diversity training. They've all been listening to this conversation with great interest. Officer Martinez felt like the floor was about to give way beneath his feet. This wasn't just about one upset parent anymore. This was about to become a much bigger situation involving corporate executives and potentially serious consequences for everyone involved. "We'll be down in 5 minutes," Dr. Thompson said. "Please make sure David knows that I'm on my way and that everything is going to be just fine." The line went dead, and Officer Martinez stood there holding the phone, knowing that the next 5 minutes were going to change everything for everyone in that lobby. Officer Martinez hung up the phone and stood there for a moment staring at it like it might explode. His hands were actually shaking slightly, and he could feel sweat forming on his forehead despite the cool air conditioning in the lobby. "Well?" Rebecca demanded, walking over to him with her arms crossed. "Did you tell her to come get her kid?" "Rebecca," Officer Martinez said slowly, "we need to talk, right now." "What's there to talk about?" "The situation is simple. Random kid sitting in our lobby without permission. Mother finally answers phone. Problem solved." Officer Martinez looked around the lobby, noticing that more people were watching them now. Word was starting to spread among the guests that something interesting was happening, and small groups were whispering to each other while trying to look like they weren't paying attention. "It's not that simple," he said quietly. "That woman. On the phone, Dr. Thompson, she says she's the CEO of Thompson Hospitality Group." Rebecca rolled her eyes. "And I'm the Queen of England. People say all kinds of things when they're caught in a lie." "Rebecca, Thompson Hospitality Group is a major hotel company. They own dozens of properties. So what if they do? That doesn't give her kid the right to just hang around our lobby whenever he feels like it." Officer Martinez stared at her in amazement. Even after everything he had just told her, Rebecca still didn't seem to understand what was happening. Either she was incredibly stubborn, or she genuinely didn't grasp the seriousness of the situation. "She's coming down here in 5 minutes," he said, "and she's bringing other executives with her." "Good," Rebecca said defiantly. "Then I can explain our hotel policies to all of them at once." Kevin, who had been listening to this conversation, with growing alarm, finally spoke up. "Rebecca, maybe we should call Mr. Patterson." Mr. Patterson was the general manager of the hotel, Rebecca's boss. He was currently in a lunch meeting across town, but Kevin thought this situation might be important enough to interrupt him. "We don't need to bother Mr. Patterson with this," Rebecca said firmly. "I can handle one angry parent and whatever business associates she wants to bring with her." Officer Martinez walked over to David, who was still sitting in his chair looking confused and scared. The boy had heard parts of the phone conversation, but he didn't really understand what was happening or why everyone seemed so upset. "David," Officer Martinez said gently, sitting down next to him, "your mom is coming down to get you in a few minutes." David's face brightened for the first time since this whole thing started. "Really? Is she done with her meeting?" "Well, she's taking a break from it to come see you." "Is she mad at me?" David asked worriedly. "I tried to tell everyone that she said I could wait here, but nobody believed me." Officer Martinez felt a pang of guilt. This whole situation could have been avoided if they had just trusted what David was telling them from the beginning. Instead, they had put a 12-year-old boy through an hour and a half of questioning and suspicion for no good reason. "Your mom's not mad at you," Officer Martinez assured him. "You didn't do anything wrong." Meanwhile, Rebecca was pacing back and forth behind the front desk, practicing what she was going to say when Dr. Thompson arrived. In her mind, she was still the one in the right here. Hotel policies existed for good reasons, and she wasn't going to be intimidated by some woman who claimed to be important. The lobby had grown quieter as word spread that something big was about to happen. Even the background music seemed softer than usual. Several guests had positioned themselves where they could see the elevator banks without being too obvious about it. At exactly 5 minutes after the phone call ended, the elevator at the far end of the lobby chimed softly. The doors opened, and Dr. Angela Thompson stepped out. She was not what anyone in the lobby had been expecting. Dr. Thompson was a tall, elegant woman in her early 40s, wearing a perfectly tailored charcoal gray business suit. Her hair was styled in a sophisticated updo, and she wore minimal but expensive jewelry. Everything about her, from her posture to the way she walked, screamed success and authority. But it wasn't just her appearance that commanded attention. There was something about her presence that made everyone in the lobby instinctively turn to look at her. She moved with the confidence of someone who was used to being the most important person in any room she entered. Behind her came 4 other people, all dressed in similar business attire. 2 men and 2 women, all looking serious and professional. One of them was carrying a leather portfolio, and another had a tablet in her hands. The lobby fell completely silent as Dr. Thompson and her group walked across the marble floor toward the front desk. Their footsteps echoed in the sudden quiet, and David looked up from his chair with relief and excitement. "Mom!" he called out, starting to stand up. Dr. Thompson's expression softened for just a moment when she saw her son, and she gave him a reassuring nod. But Hen, she turned her attention back to the hotel staff. Her face became unreadable again. Rebecca straightened her shoulders and put on what she hoped was a professional smile. She had dealt with difficult customers before, and she was confident she could handle this situation just like any other complaint. "Dr. Thompson, I presume?" Rebecca said as the group approached the front desk. "I'm Rebecca Walsh, the lobby manager here at the Grand Metropolitan." "Yes," Dr. Thompson replied simply. "I believe you've been having some concerns about my son." "Well, it's really just a matter of following proper hotel procedures," Rebecca began. "We have policies about unaccompanied minors for safety and liability reasons." Dr. Thompson listened without interrupting, her face showing no emotion at all. Behind her, the 4 executives were taking notes and observing everything that was happening. "I see," Dr. Thompson said when Rebecca finished. "And these policies, do they apply to all unaccompanied minors who sit quietly in your lobby?" Rebecca felt confident in her answer. "Of course they do. We treat all guests equally here at the Grand Metropolitan." "All guests equally," Dr. Thompson repeated. "That's interesting." She turned slightly and nodded to one of the women behind her, who stepped forward and opened her tablet. "Ms. Walsh," the woman said, "I've been observing your lobby for the past few minutes through the security cameras. Would you mind explaining why my colleagues and I can see at least 3 other children currently sitting in this lobby with their parents, none of whom were approached by your staff or asked to show identification?" Rebecca's confident expression faltered slightly. She looked around the lobby and realized that there were indeed other families present. Near the coffee shop, a mother was having a business call while her young son played with toy cars on the floor beside her. At a table by the window, a father was reviewing documents while his daughter did homework. "Those children are with their parents," Rebecca said defensively. "And my son told your staff repeatedly that he was waiting for his parent," Dr. Thompson pointed out. Yet somehow that wasn't sufficient. Rebecca was starting to feel like the conversation was getting away from her, but she wasn't ready to back down. "Your son was alone. The other children have their parents right there with them." "I see," Dr. Thompson said again. "So your policy is that children can only be in your lobby if their parents are physically present at all times?" "Yes, that's correct." Dr. Thompson nodded to another one of her colleagues, a man with silver hair who stepped forward. "Ms. Walsh," he said, "I'm Robert Chen, Regional Director for Thompson Hospitality Group's East Coast operations. Before we continue this discussion, I think there's something you should know about this hotel." Rebecca looked confused. "What do you mean?" "I mean," Robert said, "that the Grand Metropolitan Hotel is owned by Thompson Hospitality Group." "Dr. Thompson isn't just a guest here, Ms. Walsh, she's your boss." The color drained from Rebecca's face as the full impact of what Robert had just said hit her. Officer Martinez closed his eyes and shook his head. Kevin let out a quiet gasp. And all around the lobby, guests who had been pretending not to listen suddenly gave up all pretense and stared openly at the unfolding drama. Rebecca's mouth opened and closed several times, but no words came out. She looked at Dr. Thompson with new eyes, finally understanding that this wasn't just an angry parent she was dealing with. This was the CEO of the company that owned the hotel where she worked, and she had just spent the last 2 hours having Security harassed the CEO's 12-year-old son. The silence in the lobby stretched on for what felt like hours, but was probably only about 30 seconds. Rebecca stood frozen behind the front desk, her face pale and her mouth slightly open as she tried to process what she had just learned. Around the lobby, guests were no longer even pretending not to watch. Some had their phones out, clearly, recording what was happening. Dr. Thompson walked over to David, who had jumped up from his chair the moment he saw her. She wrapped her arms around him in a protective hug, and for the first time since entering the lobby, her stern expression softened completely. "Are you okay, sweetheart?" she asked quietly, smoothing down his hair. "I'm okay, Mom," David said, though his voice was still a little shaky. "I tried to tell them you were in a meeting, but they didn't believe me." "I know you did," Dr. Thompson said, kissing the top of his head. "You didn't do anything wrong." She held him for another moment, then gently guided him back to his chair. "Sit tight for just a few more minutes while I finish taking care of this, okay?" David nodded and sat back down, but this time he felt much safer knowing his mom was there. Dr. Thompson turned back to face Rebecca, and her professional mask slipped back into place. When she spoke, her voice was calm and controlled, but everyone in the lobby could hear the steel underneath. "Ms. Walsh," she began, "I want to make sure I understand exactly what happened here today." Rebecca tried to find her voice. "Dr. Thompson, I had no idea." "No idea about what?" Dr. Thompson interrupted. "No idea that I owned this hotel? Or no idea that treating a well-behaved child like a security threat might be inappropriate, regardless of who his parents are?" Rebecca's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. She looked desperately at Kevin for support, but he had taken several steps away from her and was staring at the floor. Robert Chen, the regional director, stepped forward again. "Ms. Walsh, let me ask you a question. In the 3 years you've worked here, how many times have you called security on a child who was sitting quietly in the lobby?" This was different," Rebecca stammered. "Different how?" asked the woman with the tablet, who had introduced herself as Lisa Martinez, head of corporate compliance. Rebecca looked around the lobby wildly, as if searching for an escape route. She could see the other families that were still sitting peacefully, with their children, and she realized how weak her argument sounded. "He was alone," she said weakly. "And you couldn't simply ask him for his parents' contact information?" Dr. Thompson asked. "The way you might handle any other situation where you needed to reach a guest, I thought he might be lying. You thought a 12-year-old boy in a school uniform carrying expensive books and sitting quietly reading might be lying about waiting for his mother." When Dr. Thompson put it like that, Rebecca realized how ridiculous it sounded. But she was in too deep now to back down completely. "It's my job to ensure the safety and security of all our guests," she said, trying to sound professional. "And do you feel that the other guests in this lobby were unsafe because my son was reading a book?" Dr. Thompson asked. Officer Martinez, who had been watching this exchange with growing horror, finally spoke up. "Dr. Thompson, if I may, I think there might have been a misunderstanding about hotel policies." Dr. Thompson turned to him with raised eyebrows. "Oh, what kind of misunderstanding?" "Well, Ms. Walsh mentioned that it was hotel policy for unaccompanied minors to be registered and supervised. But in my 20 years working hotel security, I've never seen that policy enforced for children who are clearly just waiting for their parents." Rebecca shot him a furious look, but Officer Martinez continued. "In fact, we see kids waiting in lobbies all the time. Business travelers bring their families. Parents step away for phone calls. Children wait while their parents check. In or out. It's completely normal." "So this policy that Ms. Walsh mentioned," Dr. Thompson said slowly, "would you say it's selectively enforced?" Officer Martinez looked uncomfortable, but he nodded. "It would appear so, yes, ma'am." Dr. Thompson turned back to Rebecca. "Ms. Walsh, I'm curious about something. When you looked at my son, what exactly did you see that made you think he didn't belong here?" It was the question that Rebecca had been dreading, because she knew what the real answer was, and she knew she couldn't say it out loud. She had seen A young black boy in an expensive hotel, and something about that had made her uncomfortable. But she couldn't admit that. Not in front of all these people, not in front of her boss's boss's boss. "I was just doing my job," she said quietly. "No," Dr. Thompson said firmly. "You were not doing your job. Your job is to provide excellent customer service to all guests, regardless of their race, age, or appearance. Your job is to make people feel welcome in this hotel, not to interrogate children who are causing no problems whatsoever." Rebecca's face was bright red now, and she looked like she might start crying. Several guests in the lobby were openly staring, and she could see some of them nodding in agreement with Dr. Thompson's words. Lisa Martinez stepped forward with her tablet. "Ms. Walsh, I need to inform you that this incident will require a full investigation by our corporate compliance department. We take allegations of discriminatory treatment very seriously, but I didn't—" Rebecca started to protest. "You called security on a black child who was doing nothing wrong," Dr. Thompson said bluntly. "A child who was polite, well-dressed, well-behaved, and who gave you accurate information about his situation. And you did this despite seeing other children in the lobby who were not questioned or harassed." The words hung in the air like an accusation. Rebecca realized that everything she said now would either make things better or make them much worse, and she was no longer confident in her ability to choose the right words. Kevin finally found his courage and spoke up. "Dr. Thompson, I want you to know that I questioned Ms. Walsh's decision from the beginning. I suggested we call the conference rooms to verify David's story, but she refused." Rebecca turned to stare at Kevin in shock and betrayal, but Dr. Thompson just nodded. "Thank you for that information, Kevin. What's your full name?" "Kevin Rodriguez, ma'am, assistant manager." "Well, Kevin, I think you and I should have a conversation about how this situation might have been handled differently." Dr. Thompson then turned to address the entire group. "This hotel has always prided itself on providing exceptional service to all guests. What happened here today falls far short of that standard." She walked over to David and helped him gather his books and backpack. "David, are you ready to go home?" "Yes, Mom," he said, looking relieved that this ordeal was finally over. As they prepared to leave, Dr. Thompson turned back to Rebecca one last time. "Ms. Walsh, you will be hearing from our Human Resources Department very soon. I suggest you use the time between now and then to think carefully about what happened here today and why it was wrong." Rebecca could only nod, her career flashing before her eyes. Dr. Thompson and her executives headed toward the elevator, with David walking close beside his mother. As they waited for the elevator doors to open, Dr. Thompson called back to Officer Martinez. "Officer Martinez, I'd like to schedule a meeting with you next week to discuss security protocols and training. I think there are some things we need to clarify." "Yes, ma'am. I'll be available whenever you need me." The elevator doors opened and Dr. Thompson's group stepped inside. Just before the doors closed, David waved goodbye to Officer Martinez, who managed a small smile and waved back. As the elevator disappeared from view, the lobby slowly returned to normal. Guests went back to their conversations, though many were still talking about what they had just witnessed. Rebecca stood behind the front desk, knowing that her life had just changed forever, and not for the better. The incident became a turning point for the entire hotel chain. Within weeks, new training programs were implemented, focusing on unconscious bias and equal treatment of all guests. The story spread through social media, becoming a powerful reminder that assumptions based on appearance can have serious consequences. And David? He continued to wait in hotel lobbies when his mom had business meetings, but now he carried with him the knowledge that not everyone would treat him fairly, and that sometimes the most important battles are fought by people who love you and refuse to let injustice stand unchallenged.